The transmission crackled through the quantum entanglement array, its signal distorted by 47 light-years of empty space. Captain Lysander Voss stood before the central holographic display, in the command center of Luna Station, watching as the alien message played for the 100th time. The translation algorithms had finally decoded the meaning, though the tone needed no interpretation. Greetings, primitive species of the third planet. Your recent ventures beyond your solar system have been noted by the Galactic Senate. We find your technology amusing. Your attempts at faster-than-light travel are crude. Your weapons laughably inadequate, and your understanding of dimensional physics barely above that of children playing with fire. We offer you this singular opportunity. Cease all expansion beyond your local star system. Dismantle your pathetic colonies and accept the protection of the Senate as a vassal species. You have one standard galactic cycle to comply. Failure to do so will result in corrective action. The message bore the seal of the Keltheran hegemony, one of the Senate's founding members. Intelligence reports suggested they commanded fleets of ships, each the size of Earth's largest cities, powered by technologies that could crack planets like eggs. Voss clenched his jaw, watching the arrogant alien's image flicker in the hologram. Ambassador Rixeval of the hegemony possessed for arms, crystalline skin that refracted light in prismatic patterns, and eyes like molten gold that seemed to peer through the screen. With undisguised contempt, the creature's translated words dripped, with condescension, treating humanity like insects that had wandered afar from their nest. Admiral Castellanos will want to see this immediately, Voss muttered to his aide, Lieutenant Commander Nix Calderon. She nodded grimly, her dark eyes reflecting the same anger that burned in every human who had witnessed the transmission. The past decade had been humanity's golden age of expansion. After the breakthrough in quantum drive technology, human colonies had sprouted across 14 star systems. New Terra, established in the Kepler 440 system, housed 12 million colonists. The mining operations around Proxima Centauri fed Earth's industrial machine with rare elements. Humanity had finally taken its first steps toward becoming a true spacefaring civilization. And now these creatures demanded they crawl back into their hole. Within hours, the transmission had reached every major command center in human space. Earth's Global Defense Council convened an emergency session. Colony governors flooded communication channels with outraged responses. The mood across human space shifted from shock to indignation, to something far more dangerous. Admiral Elena Castellanos arrived at Luna Station aboard her flagship, the UES Indomitable, flanked by 3 heavy cruisers. Her weathered face bore the scars of the Martian rebellion 15 years prior, and her steel-gray eyes had seen enough war to know when diplomacy had already failed. Show me our current fleet disposition, she commanded as she entered the tactical center. The holographic display shifted, revealing humanity's military assets scattered across known space. 237 vessels of various classes, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and the pride of the fleet, 7 dreadnoughts, each bristling with kinetic railguns, plasma cannons, and experimental gravitic weapons. It's not enough, Voss said quietly. Intelligence suggests the hegemony alone fields over 1,000 ships. The entire Senate collectively commands tens of thousands. Castellanos studied the display with the calculating gaze of a predator. Numbers aren't everything, Captain. Our species didn't claw its way to the top of Earth's food chain by accepting defeat. Before the first shot was fired, she turned to address the assembled officers. Gentlemen, ladies, we face a choice. We can bend the knee to these aliens and condemn our species to eternal servitude, or we can remind the galaxy why humans have never been good at following orders from those who consider themselves our betters. The room fell silent except for the hum of quantum processors analyzing stellar data. I want full mobilization within 72 hours, Castellanos continued. Every ship, every weapon, every desperate trick our engineers can devise. If the Galactic Senate wants to see what human primitives are capable of, we'll give them a demonstration they'll never forget. As officers dispersed to carry out their orders, Voss lingered near the display showing Earth's blue marble suspended in the void. Soon, that peaceful world might become the target of alien weapons beyond human comprehension. But humanity had one advantage their enemies didn't expect. They had never learned to yield. The hegemony's corrective fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system exactly 1 galactic cycle after their ultimatum expired. 12 massive vessels, each stretching over 8 kilometers in length, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly metal that seemed to absorb and redirect light in impossible patterns. They moved with the casual arrogance of apex predators entering a petting zoo. Admiral Castellanos watched their approach from the bridge of the Indomitable, positioned in high orbit around Luna alongside humanity's hastily assembled defensive fleet. 63 ships, everything Earth could muster on short notice, faced down an enemy force that outmassed them 20-1. "They're hailing us," reported Communications Officer Torres. "Put it through." Ambassador Rixeville's crystalline features materialized in the hologram, his forearms gesturing in what the translation matrix interpreted as mild disappointment. "Foolish creatures. We had hoped your species possessed enough intelligence to recognize its proper place. No matter. Your stubbornness will serve as an excellent example to other primitive races who might harbor similar delusions of grandeur." "This is Admiral Castellanos of the United Earth Defense Fleet," she replied, her voice steady as granite. "You are in violation of sovereign human space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The alien's laughter translated as a sound like crystal wind chimes in a hurricane. "Consequences from you? Your largest vessel is smaller than our smallest escort. Your weapons." Castellanos cut the transmission and turned to her weapons officer, Commander Reeves. "You have permission to fire." The battle erupted across the void with devastating intensity. The lead hegemony dreadnought, the Scion of Eternity, unleashed a barrage of energy weapons that tore through space like liquid fire. The beam struck the human destroyer Defiant amidships, and the ship simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris field, just empty space where 180 souls had been moments before. But humanity struck back with weapons the aliens had never encountered. The Indomitable's main railgun, accelerating tungsten rods to 30% of light speed, punched through the Scion's deflector screens like they were paper. The alien vessel's crystalline hull cracked along geometric patterns, venting atmosphere and exotic matter into the void. "Direct hit," Reeves shouted. "Their shields are down by 40%. The human fleet swarmed around the alien formation like angry hornets, using their superior maneuverability to avoid the hegemony's devastating but slow-tracking main weapons. The carrier Yorktown launched waves of unmanned fighters that dove through the gaps in the alien point defense, releasing nuclear-tipped torpedoes at close range. One hegemony cruiser, the Voice of Harmony, took 3 direct nuclear hits to its engine section. The exotic matter that powered their faster-than-light drives weighed critical, and the ship folded in on itself in a cascade of twisted space-time before exploding in a burst of gamma radiation that lit up the inner solar system like a newborn star. But the aliens adapted quickly. The Scion of Eternity rotated to bring its ventral weapons batteries to bear, unleashing a barrage that caught the human cruiser Stalingrad in a crossfire. The ship's armor-plating composite materials designed to withstand nuclear blasts melted like wax under the alien particle beams. Captain Morrison and her crew of 400 died screaming as their ship became a tomb of molten metal. The hegemony flagship, Eternal Dominion, began charging its primary weapon, a lance of coherent gravitons that could theoretically crack a moon. The space around its bow distorted visibly as reality bent to accommodate the weapon's power requirements. "Admiral," Tactical Officer Singh's voice cracked with stress, "they're targeting Earth directly." Castellanos felt ice in her veins. The planet below held 8 billion souls, including her own daughter studying at the University of New Geneva. She turned to her communications officer. "Signal all ships ramming speed. We end this now." The surviving human vessels abandoned all pretense of formation flying and charged directly at the alien flagship. The destroyer Retribution reached the enemy first, its captain Lieutenant Commander Pierce pushing the engines beyond their safety margins. She slammed her ship into the Eternal Dominion's weapon ray at 2,000 kilometers per second, the combined kinetic energy vaporizing both vessels in a fireball visible from Earth's surface. The sacrifice bought precious seconds. The heavy cruiser Churchill angled its trajectory to strike the hegemony flagship's command section, while the Indomitable lined up its remaining railgun rounds for a point-blank shot at the alien ship's reactor. But as the human ships closed distance, the Eternal Dominion's secondary batteries opened fire at close range. The Churchill lasted less than 10 seconds before its hull breached catastrophically, killing all 800 crew members in an instant of superheated plasma. The Manchester followed moments later, its captain's final transmission a defiant curse that would be remembered in every human school for centuries to come. The Indomitable reached firing range with its hull glowing cherry red from near misses and radiation exposure. Castellanos looked at her surviving crew, 17 brave souls, who had chosen to stay with their ship rather than evacuate to the escape pods. "Fire everything," she ordered. The railgun spoke one final time, sending its last round through the Eternal Dominion's reactor core at point-blank range. The alien flagship died in a cascade of exotic matter explosions that painted the void in colors that had no names in any human language. When the light faded, 16 human ships remained. From the original 63, the hegemony force was reduced to 8 damaged vessels, their formation shattered and their flagship destroyed. Ambassador Rixavel's image flickered back to life on the emergency channel, his crystalline features now cracked and bleeding. "Some form of luminous fluid. Impossible. Your species. How did you?" "We learned a long time ago," Castellanos replied from her dying bridge, "that the only way to deal with bullies is to hit them harder than they hit you." The alien fleet withdrew, but they left behind a promise that chilled every human who heard it. "The Senate will hear of this. Your species has chosen extinction." 3 months after the Battle of Luna, the first Senate armada arrived. Captain Lysander Voss stood on the observation deck of Titan Station, watching the enemy fleet materialize from hyperspace like a plague of metallic locusts. 247 ships of 17 different species, their combined firepower capable of rendering the entire Sol system uninhabitable. At their head flew the massive command vessel Divine Mandate, a Keltharian super dreadnought that dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. The past months had been a desperate race against time. Every human shipyard worked around the clock, cannibalizing civilian vessels and mining platforms to construct warships. The orbital factories around Mars ran on skeleton crews, their workers pulling 18-hour shifts to produce ammunition and armor plating. Earth's children learned to sleep through air raid sirens as defensive platforms rose from every major city, but it wouldn't be enough. Even with the emergency construction program, humanity could field only 180 vessels against an enemy force that outgunned them 3-1. Admiral Castellanos had survived the Battle of Luna, though barely. Her new flagship, the hastily constructed dreadnought Retribution, represented humanity's most advanced technology, gravitic weapons that could fold space itself, experimental antimatter torpedoes, and armor plating infused with materials reverse-engineered. From hegemony wreckage, status report, she demanded as she entered the tactical center. "Senate forces are taking position at the edge of the asteroid belt," reported Colonel Vance Kruger, her new tactical officer. "They're not advancing, just waiting." The answer came in the form of a system-wide broadcast. The image that appeared on every human communication device showed a being that defied easy description, Hierarch Omentala, the Veltaron Collective, a creature of living crystal and pure energy that existed partially outside normal space-time. "People of Earth." The translation matrix rendered its thoughts into human language. "Your species stands at a crossroads. The actions of your military have forced the Senate to take decisive measures. We offer you one final chance to avoid total annihilation. Surrender unconditionally. Submit to Senate authority, and perhaps your species will be permitted to exist as servants to your betters." The hierarch's form shifted, revealing images of human colonies under attack. New Terra burned, its cities reduced to glass by orbital bombardment. The mining stations around Proxima Centauri had been vaporized, the 3 million inhabitants reduced to constituent atoms. The agricultural worlds of the Kepler system, humanity's breadbasket, had been sterilized with biological weapons that turned their fertile soil into lifeless sand. You have 12 of your hours to respond. Failure to surrender will result in the complete eradication of your homeworld and all remaining human settlements. This is the final mercy the Senate will show your primitive species. The transmission ended, leaving behind a silence that seemed to echo across human space. Castellanos studied the tactical display showing the Senate fleet in perfect formation. Their weapons powered but not yet targeting Earth itself. They were giving humanity time to contemplate its own extinction. "Ma'am," Communications Officer Torres spoke hesitantly, "we're receiving surrender petitions from several colonial governors. The Centauri Mining Consortium is demanding immediate capitulation. They're saying we can't win this fight." "Cowards," muttered Commander Reeves, his hands clenched into fists. "They'd rather live on their knees than die on their feet." But Castellanos was studying something else on the tactical display. The positioning of the Senate fleet, their approach vectors, their formation spacing. A plan was forming in her mind, desperate and brutal beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. "Colonel Kruger, Bring up the stellar cartography data for Sol System, she ordered. I want precise measurements of solar activity over the past 6 months. The holographic display shifted to show the sun itself, its surface roiling, with magnetic storms and solar flares. Recent readings showed unusual activity mass of coronal ejections that have required the evacuation of several orbital installations. What are you thinking, Admiral? Voss asked. The Senate expects us to either surrender or meet them in conventional battle, Castellanos replied, her voice taking on the cold edge that her subordinates had learned to recognize. They're not prepared for humans to be creative. She turned to address the assembled officers. Gentlemen, ladies, 12 hours isn't much time to prepare for the end of the world, but it might be enough time to remind the galaxy that humans have never been particularly good at playing by the rules. The plan that emerged over the next 8 hours was audacious to the point of insanity. Operation Solar Storm would require precise coordination between every remaining human vessel, the sacrifice of Earth's entire orbital infrastructure, and the weaponization of the star that had given birth to human civilization itself. The risks are enormous, Chief Science Officer Dr. Yuki Nakamura warned during the final briefing. If we miscalculate by even a fraction of a percentage, we could trigger a chain reaction that destroys not just the Senate fleet, but the entire inner solar system. And if we do nothing, Castellanos replied, humanity dies anyway. At least this way, we take our enemies with us. As the deadline approached, the Senate fleet began advancing toward Earth, their weapons charging for the final bombardment that would end human civilization. They moved with the casual confidence of executioners, secure in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea that the primitive species they had come to exterminate was about to turn their own star into a weapon dot at exactly 23:47 Universal Time. Admiral Castellanos gave the order that would either save humanity or destroy it. All ships, execute Solar Storm, for Earth, for our children, for every human who ever looked up at the stars and refused to bow. The human fleet began its final advance, not toward the enemy, but toward the sun itself. The first phase of Operation Solar Storm began with what appeared to be humanity's death throes. The human fleet, outnumbered and outgunned, scattered across the inner solar system in apparent panic. Senate forces interpreted this as the breakdown of human command structure of primitive species. Finally comprehending its inevitable doom, they were catastrophically wrong. Admiral Castellanos aboard the Retribution led 12 dreadnoughts in a seemingly desperate charge toward the Senate's left flank, while Captain Voss commanded 30 cruisers in what looked like a futile attempt to break through their center. The Senate fleet adjusted their formation to counter these obvious tactics, their admirals likely discussing the pathetic spectacle of human desperation. In their command chambers, what they didn't notice was the carefully choreographed movement of 47 unmanned cargo vessels, their civilian transponders masking their true purpose as they accelerated toward the sun. At maximum burn, each ship carried experimental graviton resonators devices, reverse-engineered from captured hegemony technology and modified with human ingenuity into something the original designers never intended. Dr. Nakamura monitored the operation from Luna Station, her fingers dancing across quantum field equations that would have been impossible without the alien technology they captured. Resonator fleet approaching optimal position. She reported to Castellanos, solar magnetic field measurements are within acceptable parameters. We have a 37% chance of controlled detonation. 37%. Castellanos muttered, I bet humanity's existence on worse odds. The Senate fleet's opening barrage illuminated the void like a miniature galaxy. Energy weapons that could boil oceans struck human ships with devastating precision. The destroyer Audacious simply vanished, its crew of 200 vaporized before they could even scream. The heavy cruiser Leningrad lasted longer, its captain managing to return fire with nuclear torpedoes before a focused particle beam melted through its armored hull, killing everyone aboard in seconds. But the human fleet's apparent disarray was carefully calculated chaos. Every ship lost, every crew sacrificed, served to position the Senate forces exactly where Castellanos needed them in perfect alignment with the solar graviton pulse that was about to reshape the inner solar system. The Retribution traded fire with the Senate super dreadnought Voice of Unity, a Veltaron vessel that could crack continents. Castellanos felt her ship shudder as alien weapons stripped away armor plating like tissue paper. Her bridge crew died around her chief navigator Park vaporized by a plasma burst. That punched through the hull. Weapons Officer Reeves crushed when an explosion collapsed an entire bulkhead section. Resonator fleet in position. Dr. Nakamura's voice crackled through the damaged communications ray. Initiating quantum field cascade in 3, 2, 1. 47 ships dove into the sun's corona simultaneously, their graviton resonators activating at the precise moment they crossed the stellar magnetic field boundary. The devices didn't simply explode, they created standing wave patterns in space-time itself, amplifying the star's natural magnetic flux by several orders of magnitude. The sun convulsed. Solar plasma erupted from the star's surface in a directed, coronal mass ejection unlike anything in recorded astronomical history. Trillions of tons of superheated matter accelerated to near-light speed, guided by the artificial gravitational lensing effect of the resonators into a focused beam of stellar fury. The first Senate ships caught in the plasma stream died instantly. The Keltharian battleship Eternal Wisdom had just enough time for its sensors to register impossible energy readings before the solar hurricane struck its hull. The ship's exotic matter armor designed to withstand planet-cracking weapons lasted approximately 0.3 seconds before sublimating into component atoms. 12 more Senate vessels followed within minutes, their crews experiencing the brief terror of watching their deflector screens fail against the raw power of a weaponized star. But the solar storm was indiscriminate in its fury. Human ships caught on the periphery of the plasma wave suffered catastrophic damage. The destroyer Yorktown tumbled out of control, its hull glowing white hot as it slowly broke apart under the thermal stress. Captain Morrison's final transmission was a simple message: "Tell my daughter I kept my promise to come home." The Senate fleet's formation collapsed as admirals who had never faced such insane tactics struggled to respond. Hierarch Omental's flagship Divine Mandate began emergency evasive maneuvers, its crystal hull already showing stress fractures from proximity to the plasma storm. Phase 2. Castellanos ordered, her voice hoarse from smoke inhalation as her bridge burned around her. "All remaining ships, target the enemy command vessels. We end this now or we all die together." The surviving human fleet, less than 60 ships from the original 180, launched themselves at the disorganized Senate forces with the fury of the desperate. Nuclear warheads detonated against alien hulls in brilliant flowers of destruction. Railgun rounds punched through armor that had never been penetrated by conventional weapons. The Senate forces rallied, their superior technology and numbers beginning to tell as they adapted to human tactics. The battle became a grinding massacre, ships dying on both sides in numbers that would be remembered as the bloodiest engagement in galactic history. But humanity had achieved something impossible. They had hurt an enemy that considered them beneath notice. Senate blood or its equivalent stained the void around Sol, and their admirals were learning to fear a species they had dismissed as primitives. As the solar storm continued to rage across the inner system, neither side yet realized that this was merely the opening act of a war that would consume the galaxy. The battle of the inner sphere raged for 18 hours without pause, turning the space between Mars and Earth into a graveyard of twisted metal and vaporized dreams. What had begun as humanity's desperate gambit had evolved into the bloodiest engagement in recorded galactic history, with both sides locked in a death struggle that neither could afford to lose. Admiral Castellanos clung to consciousness aboard the dying Retribution, her flagship reduced to a hollowed-out wreck held together by emergency force fields. At sheer human stubbornness, half her crew was dead, the other half working frantically to keep life support functioning while the ship's automated systems counted down to core breach. Damage report. She croaked through lips split by decompression exposure. Lieutenant Commander Torres, now the senior surviving officer after Colonel Kruger had been killed in the last Senate barrage, consulted her flickering displays. Main engines offline. Weapons systems at 15% capacity. Hull integrity at critical levels. We've got maybe 20 minutes before the reactor containment fails. Through the shattered observation windows, Castellanos watched the carnage unfold across the solar system. The Senate Super Dreadnought Fist of Righteousness traded fire with 3 human heavy cruisers, its particle beams carving through the Defiant like a plasma torch through paper. The ship broke apart in a cascade of explosions, its crew of 600 dying in the vacuum as their escape pods were vaporized by secondary fire. But humanity was exacting a terrible price for every ship lost. The destroyer Audacity dubbed beneath the firing arc of the Vel. Terran battleship Song of Dominion releasing a spread of antimatter torpedoes at point-blank range. The alien vessel's crystalline hull cracked along geometric stress patterns, before exploding in a burst of exotic radiation that briefly outshone the sun itself. Captain Voss led the remnants of his cruiser squadron in a desperate flanking maneuver around the Senate Fleet's command section. His flagship Indomitable had lost main power 3 hours ago, running on backup fusion plants and emergency batteries, while his crew manually loaded nuclear warheads into the torpedo tubes, sir. The Stalingrad reports catastrophic damage to their reactor core. His communications officer reported. Captain Chen requests permission to make a ramming run on the enemy flagship. Voss closed his eyes briefly. The Stalingrad housed 400 souls, including Lieutenant Commander Sarah Morrison, his former academy roommate, and the godmother to his daughter. Permission granted. Tell Chen she's buying drinks for everyone in Valhalla. The heavy cruiser Stalingrad adjusted course toward the massive Senate Command ship Divine Will. Her engines pushed beyond safe parameters as Captain Chen and her crew prepared for their final sacrifice. Senate defensive fire converged on the human vessel, energy weapons stripping away armor plating and secondary systems in a display of destructive pyrotechnics that lit up the void. But Chen had timed her approach perfectly. As the Stalingrad reached critical damage levels, she triggered the ship's self-destruct sequence while simultaneously ramming the enemy flagship's command tower. The combined kinetic energy and nuclear detonation cracked the alien vessel's hull like an eggshell, venting atmosphere and crew into the merciless vacuum. The sacrifice created a gap in the Senate battle line, and Captain Voss didn't waste the opportunity. All ships, concentrate fire on the command section. We in their leadership now. The surviving human vessels poured everything they had into the wounded enemy flagship. Railgun rounds, plasma bolts, nuclear torpedoes, and experimental gravitic weapons converged on a single target with devastating effect. The Divine Will listed heavily to port, its command spire shattered and its primary weapons systems offline. But the Senate forces weren't finished. Admiral Kethver of the Hegemony, commanding from the battleship Eternal Vengeance, recognized the human tactic and ordered his own concentrated barrage on the clustered human ships. Particle beams and graviton lances reached across the void. With surgical precision, the destroyer Churchill died first, its hull simply ceasing to exist as energy weapons reduced it to component atoms. The heavy cruiser Montgomery followed seconds later. Captain Rodriguez's final transmission, a defiant curse that would echo through human military history. One by one, the ships that had broken the Senate formation paid the ultimate price for their audacity. Voss watched his squadron die around him, each loss carved into his soul like acid etching. The Wellington, Bismarck, Yamato ships named for Earth's greatest naval commanders reduced to debris fields and fading energy signatures. Their crews had died as warriors, but they had died nonetheless, sir, his tactical officer reported, with professional calm that barely masked her grief. We're down to 16 operational vessels system-wide. Senate forces still number over 100. The mathematics of extinction stared humanity in the face. Even with their desperate tactics and willingness to die for every meter of space, they simply didn't have enough ships or weapons to defeat an enemy fleet that outmassed them by such overwhelming margins. But as the battle reached its crescendo, something unexpected happened. The artificial solar storm triggered by humanity's graviton resonators began to interact with the Senate fleet's exotic matter power systems in ways that neither side had anticipated. Keltharian vessels, their hulls saturated with charged plasma from repeated exposure to the stellar bombardment, began experiencing cascade failures in their dimensional stability fields. The battleship Voice of Eternity was the first to succumb. Its hull began to phase in and out of normal space-time. The crew screams Doppler shifting across dimensional barriers before the ship folded in on itself and vanished into a pocket universe of its own creation. 3 more Senate vessels followed. Within minutes, their exotic technologies unable to cope with the unprecedented gravitational and electromagnetic stresses of fighting inside an artificially generated solar storm. Admiral Castellanos, watching from her dying flagship, realized that humanity had stumbled upon something unprecedented. Their primitive understanding of alien technology, combined with their willingness to weaponize their own star, had created conditions that the advanced Senate civilizations couldn't handle. All remaining ships, she broadcast on emergency channels, maintain position within the plasma storm, repeat stay in the fire. It's killing them faster than it's killing us. The tide of battle was shifting. But whether humanity had enough ships left to capitalize on their discovery remained to be seen. The final phase of the battle began with only 11 human ships remaining operational. Admiral Castellanos had transferred her flag to the heavy cruiser Vengeance after the Retribution finally succumbed to Cascade reactor failure, taking her veteran crew of 2 years into the void as they maintained their posts until the end. The Senate fleet, though bloodied and reduced to fewer than 70 vessels, still possessed overwhelming firepower advantage. But something had fundamentally changed in the tactical equation. The artificial solar storm continued to rage across the inner system, and alien ships equipped with exotic matter power systems were proving catastrophically vulnerable to the electromagnetic chaos. Admiral, reported Chief Science Officer Dr. Nakamura from her emergency command post on Luna Station. I'm reading massive dimensional instabilities in the remaining Senate fleet. Their faster-than-light drives are creating resonance patterns with the gravitational distortions we've introduced. If we can maintain the plasma storm for another 4 hours, their entire fleet might collapse into dimensional space for hours. Castellanos looked at her tactical display, showing the desperate state of human forces, 11 ships, most running on backup power, facing an enemy that could still destroy Earth's entire population in minutes if they chose. CONVENTIONAL bombardment over the exotic weapons that were failing them. Captain Voss aboard the Indomitable coordinated the human fleet's final formation. His ship had lost main engines and most of its weapons systems, but his crew had jury-rigged a manual firing solution for their remaining nuclear torpedoes. Around him, the other surviving vessels showed similar signs of improvised repairs and desperate innovation. The destroyer Defiance flew with her entire starboard hull blown away, her crew working in vacuum suits to maintain life support for the port compartments. The cruiser Lexington had lost her bridge entirely. Captain Maria Santos commanding from the engineering section while her ship spun lazily on its axis to damage to maintain proper attitude control, but they were still fighting. Hierarch Omental, commanding the Senate forces from the super dreadnought Final Judgment, had finally grasped the true scope of human desperation. These creatures had weaponized their own star, accepting the possibility of rendering their home system uninhabitable rather than surrender to superior forces. It was a level of tactical insanity that violated every principle of civilized warfare. All ships, the Hierarch broadcast to his remaining fleet, maintain maximum distance from the stellar radiation field. Prepare for conventional orbital bombardment of the third planet. We will end this primitive species through simple annihilation, rather than risk further exposure to their creative weapons. But as the Senate fleet began repositioning for the final bombardment of Earth, the dimensional instabilities Dr. Nakamura had predicted reached critical threshold. The battleship Song of Dominion was the first to go, its hull folding through 17 dimensions simultaneously before imploding into a singularity that briefly warped space-time. Across a 1,000-kilometer radius, the chain reaction spread through the Senate formation like a plague. Ships that had dominated their respective sectors of the galaxy for millennia found their own advanced technology turning against them. The Veltaron dreadnought Crystal of Truth phased partially out of reality, its crew experiencing the horror of existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously before the ship tore itself apart. At the molecular level, Admiral Castellanos recognized the moment when the tide turned. All ships advance on the enemy flagship. We end this now while they're still fighting their own technology. The 11 surviving human vessels, battered and bleeding atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches, accelerated toward the Final Judgment. With the fury of cornered predators, they had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The Indomitable led the charge, Captain Voss pushing his damaged engines beyond any reasonable safety margin. His ship's hull glowed cherry red from thermal stress as he closed distance with the alien super dreadnought, manually targeting systems that should have been impossible to operate under such conditions. Sir, his weapons officer reported, we have 1 nuclear torpedo left and no way to reload. The manual firing system gives us maybe a 60% chance of successful launch. Then we make it count, Voss replied. Target their command section. If we're going to die, we're taking their leadership with us. The Final Judgment turned its remaining functional weapons on the approaching human fleet. Particle beams lanced through space, striking the destroyer Defiance amidships and finally finishing what previous battles had started. The ship died in a burst of escaping atmosphere and spinning debris, her crew of 180 joining the thousands, who had already paid the ultimate price, but the human attack had achieved its purpose. The Indomitable's final torpedo struck the alien flagship's command tower with pinpoint precision, the nuclear warhead detonating inside the Hierarch's personal command chamber. Omental, an entity that had existed for over 3,000 years and commanded fleets across a dozen galactic sectors, died in a brief flash of human-manufactured fusion fire, with their supreme commander dead and their exotic technology failing. Across the board, the remaining Senate forces began a fighting withdrawal toward the edge of the solar system. The dimensional instabilities were spreading, threatening to trap their entire fleet in an expanding bubble of warped spacetime. Admiral Castellanos watched from her battered bridge. As the enemy fleet fled, their once proud formations reduced to a panicked rout. The artificial solar storm had accomplished what conventional weapons never could. It had broken the myth of Senate invincibility. Mom, Communications Officer Torres reported with exhaustion evident in her voice. We're receiving surrender offers from 17 Senate vessels. Their commanders are requesting safe passage out of the solar system in exchange for ceasing all hostile actions against human space. Castellanos studied the tactical display one final time. Humanity had started this battle with 180 ships and ended with 8 still capable of maneuvering under their own power. The cost had been horrific, nearly 50,000 human souls lost in 18 hours of continuous combat. But they had won, against impossible odds, using tactics that bordered on insanity. Humanity had defeated a galactic superpower and sent a message that would echo across every inhabited system. Earth's children would not go quietly into extinction. Rejected. Castellanos replied coldly. Any Senate vessel still in this system in 1 hour will be considered hostile and engaged accordingly. They came here to exterminate us. They can find their own way home. As the alien fleet limped away into the dark, humanity began the grim task of counting their dead and preparing for the larger war that was surely coming. The Battle of Sol had ended, but the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy burned. Admiral Castellanos stood in the war room of the newly constructed fortress, stationed orbiting Earth, studying the holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. Red zones marked systems under human control, yellow indicated contested space, and the shrinking patches of blue represented what remained of stable Senate territory. The primitive species that the Galactic Senate had dismissed as barely worth noticing had become a plague upon their ordered universe. Human fleets struck without warning across 17 sectors, their ships appearing out of hyperspace to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing back into the void. The tactics that had saved saw weaponizing stellar phenomena, exploiting dimensional instabilities in alien technology, fighting with the desperate fury of a species that refused to accept extinction, had been refined into an art of war that no galactic power could counter. Captain Voss, now promoted to admiral after his heroics at Sol, commanded the Third Fleet from his flagship Retribution, named for the vessel that had given humanity its first victory over the Senate. His ships had just returned from the Kepler system, where they had turned the hegemony's own star into a weapon, reducing their primary naval base to radioactive ash. Casualty reports from the Antares campaign, he reported to Castellanos, his face bearing the weight of command. We lost 6 destroyers and a heavy cruiser, but the Veltaron Collective has agreed to withdraw from all disputed systems. Their fleets won't engage us directly anymore. They're calling us the Star Killers in their communications. Castellanos nodded grimly. The cost of their expanding war effort had been enormous. Earth's shipyards worked around the clock, producing vessels at a rate that strained the planet's industrial capacity. Every human colony had been militarized, their populations trained for guerrilla warfare against enemies who possessed superior technology, but had never faced an opponent willing to weaponize entire solar systems. The turning point had come 3 months after Sol, when the Senate had sent a massive armada to finish what the hegemony had started. 1,200 ships representing every major galactic power had converged on human space, confident that overwhelming force would succeed where tactical superiority had failed. They had underestimated human ingenuity and the psychological impact of their previous defeat. By the time the Senate fleet reached the outer colonies, humanity had prepared every star system as a potential weapon. When the aliens arrived at New Terra, they found the colonists had evacuated to deep space while automated systems guided their sun through an artificially induced nova. The resulting stellar explosions had vaporized 300 Senate ships in the first few minutes of the battle. The survivors, faced with an enemy that would literally destroy their own worlds rather than surrender them, had broken and run. Word of the new Terra Nova spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and suddenly every species that had ever been conquered by the Senate began to wonder if liberation was possible. Rebellion erupted across a dozen sectors. The hegemony found their slave worlds in open revolt, supplied with human weapons and tactical advisors who taught them the art of asymmetric warfare. The Veltaran Collective's crystal cities burned as their subject species learned that their master's exotic technology could be turned against them with sufficient creativity and desperation. Intelligence reports from the frontier sectors. Chief Science Officer Dr. Nakamura announced as she entered the war room. The Keltheran Empire has formally requested a ceasefire. They're offering to recognize human territorial claims in exchange for a non-aggression pact. Castellano studied the proposal displayed on her command tablet. The same species that had delivered humanity's death sentence 18 months ago was now begging for peace. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Terms? She asked. Complete withdrawal from all systems within 50 light-years of Sol. Recognition of human sovereignty over current territorial holdings, and reparations equivalent to the reconstruction costs for our destroyed colonies and the other Senate powers. Most are making similar overtures, Voss reported. The hierarchy of eternal wisdom has already withdrawn their fleets to core territories. The Veltaran Collective is fragmenting as their client species declare independence. Only the orthodox hegemony is still actively fighting, and they're losing ground daily. Castellanos walked to the observation window, looking out at the bustling activity around Earth. The orbital shipyards that had once built exploration vessels and mining platforms now produce weapons of war. Humanity had been forced to choose between slavery and destruction, and they had chosen to become destroyers. But they had also become something else, liberators. Every species that had been ground under the Senate's boot for millennia now looked to the star killers from Sol as their salvation. The galaxy that had laughed at Earth's first radio signals was learning to fear the sound of human voices in the void. What about the hegemony's final offer? Dr. Nakamura asked. They're proposing a return to the original ultimatum: human withdrawal to the Sol system in exchange for ending all hostilities. Castellanos turned from the window, her steel gray eyes reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Tell them this. Humanity tried to be reasonable once. We offered coexistence, trade, peaceful expansion. The Senate's response was to demand our submission or threaten our extinction. She activated the galaxy-wide communications array, her voice carrying across the quantum entanglement network to every inhabited system within 500 light-years. This is Admiral Elena Castellanos of the United Earth Defense Force, speaking to all members of the former Galactic Senate. Your representatives came to our world with demands and threats. They called us primitive, laughed at our technology, and promised to correct our defiance through superior firepower. They underestimated what humans are capable of when our survival is at stake. The transmission reached Senate command centers across the galaxy, where alien admirals and political leaders listened to the words of a species they had dismissed as irrelevant. We have demonstrated that your ships can burn, your worlds can fall, and your stars can be turned into weapons against you. We have proven that no technology is superior to the will to survive, and no empire is too large to topple when its subjects are given hope. In the Keltheran capital system, Hierarch Velman listened to the human broadcast from his crystal throne, his forearms clenched in what his species considered deep contemplation. The Star Killers had cost his empire 1,200 ships and 47 worlds. The economic damage alone would take centuries to repair. The Senate era is over. Castellanos continued. The galaxy will no longer be divided between the rulers and the ruled, the civilized and the primitive, the strong and the weak. From this day forward, every species that desires freedom can claim it. Every world that chooses independence can have it. And every empire that threatens genocide will learn why humans are no longer willing to play by your rules. She paused, letting the silence stretch across the void before delivering her final words. To those who would be our friends, we offer trade and cooperation. To those who would be our enemies, we offer the same fate we gave your fleets at Sol, total destruction. The choice is yours. But choose quickly. Humanity has learned patience, but we have not learned to forgive those who threaten our children. The transmission ended, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. The species that had once begged for mercy from the Galactic Senate now dictated terms to their former masters. The primitive civilization that had been scheduled for corrective action had become the most feared military force in known space. In the months that followed, the remaining Senate powers would grudgingly accept the new reality. The galaxy had been reshaped by a single, simple truth. Sometimes the primitive species wins not because they are stronger, but because they are willing to go further than their enemies ever imagined possible. The age of galactic empires was over. The age of human expansion had begun. And in the depths of space, around stars that had once known only the light of ancient civilizations, new worlds were being born, under the protection of the species that had learned to weaponize the very cosmos itself. The children of Earth had claimed their place among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Castellano stood at her command post, watching the construction of humanity's newest starships, vessels designed not for conquest, but for exploration and defense. They bore names like New Horizon, Peaceful Dawn, and Second Chance. Humanity had won their war, but more importantly, they had won the right to determine their own destiny among the stars. The galaxy had laughed at Earth's first tentative signals reaching into the void. They weren't laughing anymore.